Where were you when India opened up to the world?
What's going to happen next? What is the next cool thing that's going to arrive?
Where were you when the little master was really little?
He looked like a 15 or a 16-year-old, but when he hit the ball, he looked like a 30-year-old.
Where were you when heroes and villains were trading places?
Sanjay Dutt being involved at that time came as a shock to all of us.
Harshad was the first Amitabh Bachchan of stock markets.
Where were you when India rediscovered herself?
The decade of 90s was a decade of massive transformation.
It's like a roller coaster ride. You never know what's going to happen next.
The sense of helplessness which India or Indians had, that thing got washed out completely.
Oh, he's hit this one, Miles!
We have to look beyond that.
The 1990s saw the rise of three forces: Mandal, Market, and Mandir.
Definitely not a blockbuster decade, but a shockbuster.
It is not a Harshad Mehta scam. It is a PV Narasimha Rao scam.
इसमें tragedy है, comedy है, emotion है, drama है.
जो हमारे मन में है, वो हमारी वाणी पर है.
But one word would be boom, explosive.
(1990), the beginning of the last decade of the 20th century. The Cold War was thawing, and walls were being broken. America found a nemesis in Iraq. And India was struggling with its own demons. At the start of the decade, the country of nearly 900 million people was left with a mere $1.1 billion in foreign exchange reserves. And by 1991, it barely had enough to finance 2 weeks of imports. The economy of the world's largest democracy was crumbling.
We were in a very bad economic situation. Decade beginning in 1991, we decided that the situation called for a complete paradigm change.
And what came next made the entire world sit up and take note. India broke away from decades of Nehruvian socialist order and embraced an open economy.
They led to an unshackling of individual enterprise and imagination. There was a new assertiveness that came in this country, and people said that, trying out new things was all right.
And I remember a senior editor came to me and he was sitting and chatting and he says, "Do you know that my son, who's just got a job, is drawing more money than I am?"
At a time when young India was just about finding its feet and getting ready to take flight, a young man was about to become the target of an audacious and evil plan.
I am young, and I too have a dream. I dream of an India strong, independent, self-reliant, and on the front rank of the nations of the world in the service of mankind.
Everybody was in shock and anger and grief.
To me personally, it was a very, very devastating impact because I knew him personally, he knew me personally.
Battling charges of corruption, Rajiv and the Congress had lost the 1989 general elections. With political instability at the top, the nation was headed to vote again in 1991, and it was Gandhi's chance to be back at the helm of things. He decided to reach out to the masses, increasing the intensity and the extent of his public interaction. 21st May, 1991. about 10 minutes past 10 in the night. Rajiv Gandhi was already running late for his public address in Tamil Nadu's Sri Perumbudur. But on this day in Sri Perumbudur, those eagerly awaiting his arrival weren't just locals and Congress workers. His assassins had already taken their positions.
The gang of killers assembled at the bus stand on Paris corner. Hari Babu was supposed to take the photograph of the entire sequence, which is true with the LTT. I mean, LTT had the typical kind of method that they document the entire thing.
Ironically, pictures taken by this very photographer helped the police identify the assassin. Kanmozi Rajaratnam, also known as Dhanu.
There was a young girl called Kokila. She was reciting a poem in Hindi, and Rajiv Gandhi was feeling quite happy about someone from this background reciting a poetry in Hindi. That was the situation in which Dhanu got in front of that with a garland in hand. At that point of time, she stooped and she had a small button and that toggle kind of thing, and she pressed the toggle and blew up.
A high-voltage election campaign. The young scion of India's first family in the lead. And a shocking assassination. The investigations revealed another sordid story.
Rajiv Gandhi would not have been killed if probably the intelligence agencies and the local police would have been more sagacious.
The fact that in 1991, salwar kameezes were almost unknown in rural Tamil Nadu should have alerted the police.
There was a kind of dry run for this entire thing. Earlier, when VP Singh also went to Chennai, and all these people actually went very close to VP Singh and almost garlanded him the same manner as they garlanded, and of course, Dhanu killed Rajiv Gandhi.
The LTTE never forgave Rajiv Gandhi for sending the Indian Army, which, as it turned out tragically, had to fight the LTTE.
The LTTE had been vehemently opposed to Rajiv Gandhi's decision of sending Indian peacekeeping forces to fight alongside the Sri Lankan government in 1987. The troops were withdrawn only in 1990, after Gandhi's party lost the elections the previous year. With the possibility of Rajiv winning the 1991 elections, the LTTE feared the IPKF coming back on Sri Lankan soil. So, the LTTE decided to take matters into its own hands.
So in 1987, when Prabhakaran, the LTTE Supremo, he came to India, and the discussions that took place between him and Rajiv Gandhi and other people, he very strongly resented against certain terms and conditions in Delhi itself. And we have the information to say that he did not like the way he was treated. And he decided to kill Mr. Rajiv Gandhi.
Shock and despair engulfed the nation as the Gandhi scion embarked on his last journey.
It was very depressing, and also it was, you just don't feel secure anymore. If that can happen to a man like Rajiv Gandhi, it can happen to anybody, which is what the whole point of terrorism is, to make you feel insecure about anything around.
I am young, and I too have a dream. I dream of an India strong, independent, self-reliant, and on the front rank of the nations of the world in the service of mankind.
As one young visionary's dream was shortened, the 90s were ripe for another young dreamer to take flight. And the size of his dreams had nothing to do with his age.
I was in love with Sachin Tendulkar. And I was heartbroken when I found out that he was married.
Sachin Tendulkar for me is always the 9-year-old boy who used to come to our club matches with his brother who used to play with us. And the thing about his brother was technically correct, but couldn't hit the ball beyond the square. So he could bat for 2 hours and score 5 runs. And this little boy, whatever else he could do, would hit the ball so hard that the chairs in our tent in Azad Maidan would start rattling.
No traffic, nothing. If they didn't have a TV, they were crowded outside shops which had TVs in the window.
I think anyone who knew Sachin in those early years was taken up by his sheer power.
From a test century at Old Trafford in Manchester in August 1990 to an unbeaten 114 in Australia, to becoming India's opening batsman in the mid-90s, Sachin wasn't just a cricketer anymore.
I will never forget the Desert Storm, the Sharjah match, when the entire stadium stood and clapped for him. That, I think, for me, was his most iconic moment.
The Master Blaster didn't just change the face of Indian cricket. His success story became an inspiration for millions of Indian youth who were just about learning to dream. Sachin had become India's pride.
In my living memory as a journalist, I haven't known of any player, even at that age, at say 14, talked about the way Sachin Tendulkar was being talked about.
But many believe what lent an added advantage to this legend was the dynamic era he lived in. The early 90s was also the era when satellite television found its way into India. And Tendulkar was arguably the first satellite sports hero of Indian television.
Why, Sachin? Have a Pepsi. Pepsi? Nothing official about it.
Gavaskar was the black and white hero. Kapil Dev was of the 1980s, the transition period of color television. But satellite television, Sachin Tendulkar was the first icon of the age of satellite television.
Okay, his achievement is his achievement. But I think that achievement was showcased on the world stage because suddenly India was a market.
As the markets opened up, a flurry of private television channels and international brands rushed in to test Indian waters. And with both on the lookout for new heroes to grab eyeballs and bring in the moolah, Tendulkar seemed like the perfect package.
For people like Sachin, the kind of talent, the kind of achievements, and the kind of media exposure, especially television, gave to them, they became larger and larger than life.
On the field or off it, the country was cheering in one voice for Sachin. But in the very same decade, voices of dissent and discord were also rising in India. A conflict of humongous proportions was reaching its peak. Kashmir was about to be transformed from being a romantic song location to being the hotbed of opinions and politics. The decade of the 90s saw India's achievements find their place on the world stage. It also proved to be a decade of chaos and turmoil like never before.
Kashmir closing down for a normal person like me to go to was a great setback.
Militants, flaunting Russian Kalashnikovs, took over the quaint bylanes of Srinagar with the call for Azadi, or liberation, of the late 80s, taking an ugly turn in the 90s. Stories of violence started making almost daily headlines.
A place which I have spent my childhood in, which is Kashmir, going through the turmoil that it went through, and to have any religion being attacked by anything for that matter is hugely alarming from a human point of view.
The alarm bells, though, went off in the mid-80s itself. The first signs of discontent among the Kashmiris were spotted on an unlikely pitch.
There was that one cricket match which was played, I think, between India and West Indies, where the crowd started in Srinagar cheering for the opposition, the West Indians. And I think that was the first sign that we got, because by then television was live, that something was wrong.
The slow and simmering sense of alienation soon turned into a strong separatist movement. The elections of 1987, many believe, defined the course that Kashmir would take.
The 87 elections were really the turning point.
The elections that were held were not believed to be free and fair elections. Most of those elections are believed to have been rigged.
I still remember many years later meeting Sayyid Salahuddin. By then he had become the leader of the Hizbul Mujahideen. And I remember him telling me that, I would have been a PWD minister in the government in Srinagar if that election had not been rigged. His agent was Yasin Malik. He was contesting the election. Had they won the election, who knows? He would have just been a minister in the government and Yasin Malik would have been his secretary. Instead, Yasin Malik becomes the head of the JKLF and Salahuddin becomes the head of the Hizbul Mujahideen.
In the decade to follow, both the Hizbul Mujahideen and the Jammu Kashmir Liberation Front would champion the agenda of a separate Kashmir with an almost militant zeal, leaving the valley communally polarized forever. The Kashmiri pundits, who had been on tenterhooks for a while now, chose to desert the valley, a mass exodus of sorts.
Every time I go to Kashmir, I come back feeling depressed. It's the most beautiful land in the world, but it is a frozen turbulence. I mean, it's beautiful, but frozen.
As the valley was riddled with bullet holes and despair, the 90s also witnessed the tearing down of a building, which eventually tore down the communal peace of the entire nation.
When you go back in history and look back at the time when this country was polarized and its secular fabric was stretched to its ultimate, was actually the pinnacle was the breaking of the Babri Masjid.
It was the morning of 6th December, 1992. A massive mob of car sevaks across North India marched towards Babri Masjid in Ayodhya. Passions ran high as they set out to reclaim what they believed was Ram Janmabhoomi, or the birthplace of Lord Ram.
Even when the demolition was taking place, government machinery fell into a certain degree of semi-paralysis.
The demolition of the Babri Masjid gave the extreme elements of the Hindu majority a war cry. Let's build the Ram temple. Mr. Advani saw the opportunity.
As fundamentalists from both sides took center stage, the repercussions were disastrous. But those in the thick of the action looked at the Babri Mosque demolition more as a culmination of what began in 1990.
Jo Hindu hit ki baat karega, wahi desh pe raj karega. I still remember that slogan of the Rath Yatra.
25th September 1990. BJP veteran L.K. Advani took off from Somnath Temple in Gujarat on his Toyota Chariot. The chariot idea, proposed by the late BJP strongman Pramod Mahajan to mobilize car sevaks and volunteers, seemed to be working.
The Rath Yatra then completely politicized the communal divide.
The procession was punctuated with heavy-duty sloganeering and high-voltage speeches.
जो हमारे मन में है वो हमारी वाणी पर है जो हमारी वाणी पर है वो हम कृति में उसको कार्यान्वित करते हैं और यदि बाबा के नाम की मस्जिद नहीं बनेगी तब क्या बनेगा बोलो क्या बनेगा
Though the rally was cut short in Bihar's Samastipur with Advani's detention, by now the BJP had managed to make more than a dent on the national stage with L.K. Advani as its new hero.
L.K. Advani was actually a very He was a man of letters. He used to be into books. He was not a dramatic public speaker like a Vajpayee was. But he was able to infuse the party at that moment with this big idea of secularism versus pseudo-secularism, latched on to the Ram Janmabhoomi movement, and almost overnight became the face in a way of Hindutva politics. I remember years later asking Mr. Advani, you were transformed into this Hindu militant. And he turned around to me and said, no, there is not a trace of the militant in me. And he smiled benignly at his wife who was next to me and asked her, am I a militant? Is there any militancy in me?
As Hindutva politics emerged as a strong alternate ideology in the 90s, BJP further strengthened its foothold in national politics. And its tally in the general elections shot up from 85 in 1989 to 120 in 1991. And some believe it even managed to steal the thunder from the other crucial political movements of that time in the bargain, particularly the Mandal movement. Established in 1979, the BP Mandal Commission recommended giving other backward classes, or OBCs, exclusive access to a certain quota in government jobs and educational institutes. With the VP Singh government deciding to implement the recommendations in 1990, the overall reserved quota increased to 49.5%, something that was met with violent reactions from certain sections of the society.
I saw the youth immolating themselves with Jinda Jalana.
Mandal movement and the Mandir movement, they were actually brewing for some years. Way in which they were catapulted to confront each other happened when the BJP decided to proceed and go ahead with the Advani Rath Yatra. When as supporters of the government and as a big part of it, when it became clear that VP Singh was moving towards constitutionally formalizing the Mandal reservations. So Mandir emerged as the counter to the Mandal type of politics.
And then, the political parties encouraged people to vote their caste instead of casting their vote. Extreme opinions and extreme reactions eventually led to this. From North Indian cities like Ayodhya and Varanasi, to Bhopal in central India, to Surat in the west. Widespread rioting was reported across the length and breadth of the country. But one of the worst hit was the city that took great pride in its cosmopolitan culture, Mumbai. MTV, pop music, satellite television, mobile phones, and the internet. Many new words were entering the Indian lexicon in the 90s, but other words, like communalism, Mandir, and Mandal, took on a whole new meaning. India's secular fabric was ripped, and soon the whole country was ablaze. Outcry over Babri Masjid demolition resonated across the nation. Even as instances of rioting were reported across several cities, the epicenter unwittingly shifted to Mumbai. Before one knew it, the city of dreams turned into an ugly nightmare, sending shivers down the spine of an ordinary Mumbaikar.
We actually got stranded at the airport because they said it's better you guys don't take off and land in Mumbai because Mumbai is going through a mess.
On the evening of the 6th December, 1992, hours after the Babri Mosque was demolished, a group of people gathered at the South Mumbai's Minara Mosque. But what was meant to be a prayer meet soon turned violent.
it was a very spontaneous reaction. One of the leaders of the committee started giving some inflammatory speeches. The police realized that the mob was becoming unruly. They wanted the mob to disperse, but the mob was not willing to budge. So it resulted into kind of lathi charge.
A chain reaction was set in motion. Over 400 shops were gutted in South Mumbai's Nol Bazaar. And soon enough, incidents of rioting were reported from all across Mumbai. Next, curfew was imposed in many parts of the city.
To see a city I had grown up with, I loved Mumbai. I still love it. I used to go to Muhammad Ali Road during Eid to have bhori khana. Then to go as an adult and report on the places which I could see was, burning and there was smoke in the air.
I hated what was happening in the name of religion. Suddenly, as children, we couldn't understand why people were killing each other over religion.
After about 3 weeks, the riots did subside, but the breather was temporary. A month later began the second phase of Mumbai riots.
There's a street near Bindi Bazaar where one side you have Hindus living and the other side Muslims. And they were, suddenly sloganeering against each other. And you suddenly sense what happened to my wonderful, innocent Mumbai. The Hindus on one side and Muslims on the other side of the street were baying for each other's blood.
A lot of damage were done, a lot of lives were lost, a lot of precious lives were lost. It came as a very big shock more than anything else.
A shock that cost 900 lives in the cosmopolitan city of Mumbai and split it right in the middle. But little did Mumbai's inhabitants know that the biggest blow was yet to come. Revenge by two Muslim men shook the city to its core. March 1993. It was 1:30 in the afternoon, and employees at the Bombay Stock Exchange were busy at their desks. A loud noise caught everyone's attention.
The first reaction was that this is probably just a rumor. And then somebody called me and said, no, there is a blast. So, we rushed to the exchange.
It stunned us, surprised us, because we had no idea of what these blasts were really about.
Just as we were standing there and they were blocking everybody from going in, obviously, and they were trying to evacuate the building, we got news that the Air India building had a blast.
The city saw 10 bombings in a span of 2 hours, and at 2 places, Tiger Memmon's people also hurled hand grenades manually.
Ibrahim Tiger Memon was one of the top aides of the underworld don Dawood Ibrahim, leader of D Company, one of the world's most notorious criminal organizations.
We were all petrified about the fact that where will the next one happen? But at the same time, there was a sense of how can they do it to us? How can somebody do it to this city?
In 1993, we had very little idea about what was terrorism. We knew about the underworld. We knew about the Dawood Ibrahims. We knew about their gunfights. But we had no clue of RDX. I remember when the police commissioner, Mr. Samra, telling me, Rajdeep, RDX has been used in these bomb blasts. I said, sir, RDX? What is this RDX?
While the layman was still getting familiar with terms like RDX, the blast that killed 257 and injured over 700 left the police baffled. But a breakthrough was soon to be made.
It's only when one chartered accountant came to me and he mentioned the fact that Memmon's brother had transferred large amounts of money to various people and had fled. It was almost like a revenge.
And as a warning saying that, if you do a program against us, this is what we'll do to your city.
The police filed charge sheets against 189 accused persons after about 8 months, and a year later arrested Tiger Memmon's brother Yaqub Memon. And then, it was almost as if a film script came true.
Sanjay Dutt being involved at that time came as a shock to all of us.
Sanjay Dutt, already a leading Bollywood star by then, was accused of illegally possessing an AK-56 rifle. The weapon was found to be part of the arms consignment meant to be supplied to the perpetrators of the Mumbai blasts.
He was shooting with me in Mauritius for a film called Atish. As soon as he landed back from Mauritius, that's when the cops got him at the airport.
While Dutt would eventually be acquitted of terrorism charges, he'd still be required to serve a 5-year sentence for illegal possession of weapons.
As a friend and as a human being, I stand by him because I've done many movies with him. I've known his dad, we've been family friends, I know his sister very well. Somewhere you feel, no, this can't be. But then, like I said, we all have faith in the judicial system, and ultimately the truth prevails.
He certainly is guilty of hobnobbing with the underworld, of using the support of the underworld to store weapons in his house, for which he deserves punishment. But my point is, in that Mumbai of the early 90s, the underworld, which was part of the film industry, suddenly becomes a terrorist. Yaqub Memon, who's a chartered accountant, becomes a terrorist. A travel agent becomes a terrorist. So those 5 months changed Mumbai. It changed probably Sanjay Dutt as well.
In the 90s, the film industry and the underworld nexus was a popular opinion. But it took a horrifying murder for the dirty shenanigans of glamour and guns to come to the forefront. Gulshan Kumar, the music mogul, reportedly refused to pay up. What he received in return for this bravado was a gang-style assassination. 16 bullets in broad daylight.
12th August 1997, when Mr. Kumar was so brutally killed outside Jeet Mahadev Mandir in Andheri, people still remember that how he was crawling and how Abu Salim was hearing his painful screams on the phone. This was only meant to scare the Bollywood, and Bollywood did get scared after this.
Many believed Bollywood was dealing with a merciless nemesis who they'd fed themselves on their fear.
I think unfair to actually condemn the film stars at that time, or the industry, of being hand in hand with the underworld, because at a certain point they had no choice. I remember a lot of incidents at that time of people getting calls, getting threatened. If you don't appear at this so-and-so point or at this show, you see what happens to your family.
In the decade of mandir, masjid, music, and murder, India's middle class came of age, finding enough confidence to shine on international platforms.
To go on to become an ambassador of peace, goodwill, harmony, and compassion, and try and do full justice to our motto, beauty with a purpose. Remember, people, I'll always be there for you. Thank you.
Oh my God, these are really beautiful women, and they're really intelligent, and they're saying such incredible things, and it's really cool that, you know, we have women like this representing us at an international platform.
(1994). For the first time in the history of international beauty pageants, both Miss Universe and Miss World crowns adorned Indian heads in the same year.
Remember, first thing looking at it and saying, wow. You know, because you never thought an Indian girl winning Miss Universe, Miss World, these were supposed to be won by the West. Venezuelan women won it.
And a nation that was just about getting a grip on itself in a post-globalized economy was suddenly in shock and awe.
We all were very, very proud. It was a great moment for Sushmita Sen and an Aishwarya Rai to come back with the most coveted titles.
It stunned everybody here. It gave beauty, Indian beauties, a whole new face, and it empowered women.
But not everyone was raving about the triumph of Indian beauty.
I have a lot of conspiracy theories, and one of my conspiracy theories, not taking anything away from Sosh or Diya or all of these people, and they've also deserved winners. But I always felt that I said, I'll tell you why Indians are winning all the time. This is the cosmetic industry. It's trying to come into India. They were trying to get into South America first, and that's why they were winning. And now Indians are winning because the cosmetic industry wants to get in.
I've seen that behind the scene thing. Marketers drive that, which country, which girl will get, not which girl, but definitely which country. And they could see that India's consumers are opening up. They will consume more and more and more.
There was a new market that was emerging, and giving sort of these big prizes to these women and making them the brand ambassadors sort of probably helped these product industry.
Talking with her eyes, walking like a winner, she'll take you by surprise. She's got the look. She's got the look.
The beauty industry was ready to go global. So I think they were just there at the right time at the right place.
How far the twin victories added an extra bling to India's beauty industry is debatable, but the 90s gave that much-needed swagger to the nation and its women.
There was something very unique and very brilliant about these two women and what they had achieved. So yes, it did spark an interest in this platform.
While two other Indian girls, Yukta Mukhi and Diana Hayden, bagged the coveted titles later in the decade, the new millennium began seeing a steady influx of young women from humble backgrounds claiming their own beauty spot in the glam world.
I think Sushmita and Aishwarya winning the international pageants gave young Indian girls a new aspiration. I think it gave them an idea that beauty could be a combination of looks and brains.
They both went out and conquered the world. And it was a great moment for this country. We finally had arrived. Sachin Tendulkar, Sushmita Sen, Aishwarya Rai. I mean, what more could you want?
Oh yes, India was ready to compete. Maybe it was the milk that India was drinking. After all, it became a favorite of the gods too.
Suddenly out of the blue, Ganpati starts drinking milk, and if it did, my question at that time was, how come it never did that before?
Why would Ganeshji do that, I mean, is he short on milk or is there short supply in heaven? Why would he come down on earth and drink everybody's milk?
21st September 1995. Thousands of Indians queued up outside Ganesha temples with packets and bottles of milk. After all, Ganesha was said to be drinking milk from the hands of his very own devotees.
Can you ever imagine that the whole nation actually sitting with a Ganesha idol trying to feed him milk, and the news channels then going berserk and milking it dry?
While the whole country and the international media were busy marveling at the milk-drinking idols, the real miracle happened elsewhere. Milk sales shot up by a whopping 30%. The decade had its moments of highs and lows. The nation also witnessed its own divine intervention moment. And somewhere, there was one man from suburban Mumbai milking the entire trading universe.
Mr. Ranina, who was his chairman in his company, called him the Amitabh Bachchan of stock markets.
And this superstar of the trade market did prove he knew his craft way better than the others. The infamous stockbroker Harshad Mehta manipulated the markets to the tune of 4,000 crore rupees by exploiting loopholes in government securities trade.
How could the government, how could the systems, how could the banks allow this to happen?
Just thought that if you are smart enough, you can actually make 500 crores overnight.
Well, that's the shock value the scam carried. It all began small and simple. Mehta began with the basics. He understood the system first.
Part of the reason why you had a security scam was that banks virtually allowed their treasury to be run by brokers, which is why you had the most astonishing thing of brokers being given checks running into hundreds of crores of rupees in their account.
With brokers becoming the most crucial link in the business of trading of government securities in an era when digitization was still a far cry, that's the situation Harshad Mehta took advantage of. Just that this time, he ran out of luck.
So, a check was issued by State Bank of India to Harshad Mehta. Now, the person who allowed him to take it out from State Bank of India had gone on leave, and somebody else who was tallying the book suddenly realized there's a big hole of 550 crores. Then the Reserve Bank of India stepped in, and to their horror, they discovered that it had come from the National Housing Bank, which is a subsidiary of the Reserve Bank of India. Okay, so it just suddenly showed that the tentacles of these brokers were virtually into the RBI.
While the trade world was left gaping at the possible extent of rot, this Amitabh Bachchan of the stock market brought in the most unpredictable twist that film folk could certainly learn from.
And he had this dramatic press conference with Ram Jethmalani and Mahesh Jethmalani to say that he bribed the Prime Minister. I believe that it did happen. It fizzled off because there were some backdoor negotiations.
Yes, the money was paid to the Honorable P.V. Narasimha Rao, the Prime Minister of India. People don't give human names to a scam. But if a human name is to be given to this scam, it is not a Harshad Mehta scam, it is a P.V. Narasimha Rao scam.
As audacious as these words, the decade was a stunner. Buildings were being broken, so were the records. Terror took multiple forms, but so did ambition. Careers were cut short while achievements began to pile up. In the 90s, amidst the debris of scams, scandals, riots, and discord, an entire nation was coming of age. A nation was ready to take flight. Where were you when a billion people were dreaming the great Indian dream?